Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something uh, a little bit dangerous.
Dangerous is a good word for it.
We are taking a sledgehammer to some of the most cherished, held close to the heart myths of the marketing world. We are, I think, questioning the very religion that most business owners and CMOs pray to every single day.
It really is a demolition job today, isn't it?
Yeah.
And religion is exactly the right word. We're talking about beliefs that people hold with, absolute conviction, often without ever really looking at the evidence.
Exactly. And the source for this demolition job, the book we're looking at, has been voted a best marketing book by Ads readers.
Mm.
But at the same time, it makes a lot of traditional marketers just squirm in their seats. It's almost heretical. We are talking about How Brands Grow, What Marketers Don't Know by Professor Byron Sharp and his colleagues at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute.
This is one of those books that really divides a room instantly. You can almost see the line drawn in the sand. On one side, you have the traditionalists.
Right.
These are the people who believe marketing is an art form, a game of deep persuasion, emotional connection, and brand love. They really believe in the magic of the brand.
And on the other side, who's on the other side of that line?
On the other side, you have Byron Sharp, and he comes in not with opinions, but with mountains of empirical data. I mean, decades of it, across every category you can imagine, from cars to canned soup. And he basically says, actually, stop the poetry. There are laws here.
Laws, like scientific laws.
Yes, like in physics or chemistry. He's saying there are patterns that are so predictable, they function like laws. And if you ignore them because they don't feel romantic or they don't fit your creative brief, your brand will not grow. Simple as that.
So that is our mission today. We want to uncover these immutable laws. We want to move from what Sharp calls, and I love this phrase, medieval marketing beliefs, to evidence-based science.
From alchemy to chemistry.
Yes. And here is the hook for everyone listening. Whether you are the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or maybe a small business owner just trying to sell coffee, or even if you're just someone who buys toothpaste and wonders why you buy the one you buy, this is going to fundamentally change how you look at the commercial world.
Oh, absolutely. You will not be able to walk down a supermarket aisle the same way again, I promise you. You'll see the matrix behind the shelves.
I love that. Okay, so let's unpack this. To get us into the right headspace, I want to start with a story. It's a parable, almost, that Sharp uses early in the book, and it perfectly illustrates the typical panic that happens inside big companies.
Right.
I want you to imagine you are the insights director at Colgate-Palmolive.
Okay, I'm there. I'm in the boardroom. High stakes. The air conditioning is humming a bit too loud. I can feel the pressure.
The pressure is on, and Margaret, the senior category manager, walks into your office. And she is visibly distressed. I mean, she is waving this brand health tracker report from a global market research supplier, and she is panicking. She says the report shows that Colgate is unhealthy.
Unhealthy. That is a word no brand manager ever wants to hear. It usually precedes a budget cut, or worse, a firing. What's the specific diagnosis in this report? What's so bad?
Okay, so the data shows 3 specific things that have sent Margaret into a complete spiral. First, your main competitor, Crest, has double the market share that you do.
Okay, that's not great, but it's a known fact.
Right. But second, the report shows that Colgate relies heavily on switchers. These are people who don't just buy Colgate, they buy other brands too. They aren't, faithful.
The promiscuous consumer. The cardinal sin in classic marketing.
Exactly. And third, and this is the one that really hurts, Colgate has fewer loyal customers than Crest. The numbers are right there in black and white.
Oof. Okay, I can see why Margaret is panicking. In the traditional marketing world, the world that, frankly, most of us were trained in, that sounds like a death knell.
It does.
It sounds like you're smaller, your customers are cheating on you with other brands, and they just don't seem to love you as much as they love the competition. It paints a picture of a brand that is just failing to connect on an emotional level.
And the consultant's report, the one Margaret is waving around like a white flag, agrees with her completely. It says Colgate has a perception problem.
Of course it does.
It says you lack loyalty. And so the recommendation is you need more persuasive advertising to fix the brand. You need to launch a new campaign that makes people love Colgate again. You need to stop them from switching.
And here is where we have to hit the pause button.
Yeah.
Because this is the critical moment.
Yeah.
If you, as the Insights Director, follow that advice, if you sign the check for that new brand love campaign, you are going to waste millions and millions of dollars.
Really? But the data seems so clear. Loyalty is down. People are switching. You have to do something.
The numbers are correct. But the interpretation is dead wrong. Margaret is panicking because she and the consultants don't understand the fundamental laws of how brands actually grow. Colgate's metrics, the lower loyalty, the reliance on switchers, are exactly where they should be for a brand of its size.
So you're telling me it's not a bug, it's a feature. This isn't a crisis at all.
It's not just a feature, it's a law. It's a mathematical certainty. If you are a smaller brand than your competitor, you will automatically have slightly lower loyalty numbers. It doesn't mean your product is bad. It doesn't mean your marketing is failing. It just means you are smaller.
So expecting Colgate to have the same loyalty metrics as Crest is.
What? It's like expecting a planet with half the mass of Earth to have the same gravitational pull. It's physically impossible. The panic is based on a complete misunderstanding of the physics of the market.
That has to be a huge relief for anyone out there running a number 2 or number 3 brand. You aren't necessarily doing it wrong. The math is just working as intended.
It should be a relief, but often it's very hard for people to accept because we are so conditioned, so indoctrinated to believe that loyalty is the ultimate goal, the holy grail.
So to understand why this happens, we have to step back. You mentioned the scientific revolution that Sharp is calling for, and he uses this really provocative analogy involving medical history that I think frames this perfectly.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the book. It's so powerful.
He compares modern marketers to medieval doctors, right?
He does. And believe me, it is not a flattering comparison. Think about it. For 2,000 years, the smartest, most well-educated people in society, the doctors, practiced bloodletting.
Right. The idea was that if you're sick, it's because of an imbalance in your 4 humors, so you have to drain the bad blood out to restore balance.
Exactly. It was best practice. It was taught in the best universities. It was the accepted science of the day. And get this, George Washington, the first U.S. president, died after his doctors drained about 80 ounces of blood from him.
80 ounces?
Yeah. It's almost half the blood in the human body.
Yeah.
They're trying to cure a sore throat.
That is just horrifying. They literally killed him trying to save him.
They did.
Yeah.
But here is the absolutely crucial point. They did it with total confidence. They weren't bad people. They thought they were helping. They did it because it was based on a high-minded, logical-sounding theory, Galen's theory of humors. It made sense in their heads.
But they never checked the data.
They never checked the data. They never ran a control group.
Right.
They never recorded whether patients who were bled got better or worse than patients who weren't. They just kept doing it because everyone else was doing it, and the theory said it should work.
And Sharp is saying marketers today are doing the same thing. We're just bleeding our brands to death based on flawed theories.
He is arguing that we are currently in the bloodletting phase of marketing. We follow these Kotlerian worldviews, named after Philip Kotler, the father of modern marketing textbooks.
I have that textbook on my shelf.
We all do. And it tells us we must differentiate or die. It tells us we must target loyal customers. It tells us to build brand love. But we rarely, if ever, check if the empirical data actually supports these grand theories. We're operating on philosophy, not science.
So what we need is a germ theory for marketing. We need laws that are based on observation of what actually happens at the cash register, not what we wish would happen in a focus group.
Precisely. We need to stop looking for magical explanations and start looking for the patterns that repeat over and over and over again, regardless of the country, the category, or the decade.
Okay, before we get into the really heavy data, and there is some truly mind-blowing data coming up, I want to put our listeners to the test. This is what Sharp calls the strategic assumptions test.
All right, let's do it.
I'm going to read a statement, a core belief in marketing, and I want you, the listener, to decide if it's true or false in your head. And then you, our expert, can give us the brutal, evidence-based truth.
I am ready. Let's see how many medieval doctors we have listening today.
All right, statement number 1. Differentiating our brand is a vital marketing task. We must give consumers a distinct reason to buy us over the competition. True or false?
I mean, every marketer in the world would scream, true! That's marketing 101. It's the first thing you learn. Sharp's data says false. Or, at the very least, highly, highly misunderstood. Brands are much more similar than we like to admit, and differentiation is not the primary driver of growth.
Wow. Okay, that one is going to make some people angry, but we'll come back and explain it in a bit. Statement number 2. Loyalty metrics reflect the strength, not just the size, of our brand.
Again, conventional wisdom says true. High loyalty means you have a strong, healthy brand. People love you, Sharp says. False. Loyalty metrics are largely just a reflection of your market share. If you are big, you look loyal. If you're small, you don't. It's an output, not an input.
That connects back to the Colgate story.
Perfectly.
Okay, statement number 3. This is a big one. It costs 5 times less to retain a customer than to acquire a new one.
Oh, the golden rule of customer relationship management, or CRM. It's in every single consultant's pitch deck. Everyone knows this stat, Guy Sharp says.
False. There is absolutely no empirical evidence to support that specific 5x number in general consumer marketing. And more importantly, the strategic implication is wrong. Acquisition is the primary driver of growth. You simply cannot retain your way to success.
This is just a demolition derby. Okay, last one. Price promotions boost market penetration, not loyalty.
This one feels a bit tricky. The whole point of running a sale is to get new people to try the product, right? To get them in the door.
Exactly. You're trying to grow your user base.
Sharp says, false. The overwhelming evidence shows that price promotions largely just reach your existing customers. They don't bring in that many new lasting customers. You're mainly just giving a discount to people who are probably going to buy you anyway.
So if you answered true to most or all of those, congratulations. You are a normal, well-trained marketer.
You are. But according to how brands grow, you are also operating on a set of assumptions that are not supported by the facts. And that's what we are going to dismantle now, one by one. I think we have to start with the most important law in the book. The law that explains exactly why Margaret at Colgate was panicking for no reason at all. It's called the law of double jeopardy.
This is the bedrock. If you understand this one law, the rest of the book clicks into place.
Double jeopardy. It sounds like a game show, or maybe a legal thriller, but in marketing it sounds ominous. Like bad news. What is it?
It is a pattern, a startlingly consistent pattern that has been observed in hundreds of product categories across dozens of countries over decades and decades of research. It is as close to a law of physics as we have in marketing.
Okay, so what's a law?
Simply put, smaller brands get hit twice, hence double jeopardy. They get a double penalty for being small.
Hit twice how? What are the 2 blows? What's the jeopardy?
Okay, so blow number 1 is the obvious one. They have fewer buyers. That's just what it means to be a small brand. You have lower market penetration.
Right, fewer people buy you. That makes sense.
But the second hit is the one that causes all the confusion and panic. The few buyers that small brands do have also buy the brand slightly less often. They have lower purchase frequency, or what marketers call lower loyalty.
Wait, so let me get this straight. Not only do I have fewer customers than the big guy, but the customers I do have seem to like me less. They're not buying as often.
That's how it looks on the spreadsheet, and that's why people panic. But I would say they don't like you less, they just buy you less frequently. But here is the critical moment that Sharp really hammers home. The difference in that loyalty and that frequency between a giant brand and a tiny brand is actually very, very small.
So the loyalty gap isn't the real story.
Not at all. The massive difference, the chasm between a big brand and a small brand, is in the number of buyers. It's all about penetration.
Let's go back to the Colgate versus Crest example to make this really concrete. Put some numbers on it.
Let's do it. So in this scenario from the book, Crest is the market leader. It has a huge market share. Colgate is the challenger with maybe half that share. The data shows that Crest has way, way more buyers, much higher penetration.
Okay.
And if you look at how often their buyers buy, Crest buyers might buy at, let's say, 2.5 times a year on average.
2.5 times.
Now you look at Colgate. Because they are smaller, the law predicts their buyers will buy them a little less often. So their buyers might purchase Colgate, say, 2.0 times a year.
Okay, so a huge, massive difference in the number of people buying them, but a pretty tiny difference in how often they buy. 2.5 versus 2.0. That's it.
Exactly. And that tiny difference in frequency, that 0.5 purchase per year, is mathematically determined by the size difference. It's a shadow cast by your market share. So Margaret's strategy to fix loyalty is doomed from the start.
Because you can't fix a shadow.
You can't. You can't grow Colgate by trying to somehow force your existing customers to brush their teeth more and buy toothpaste 5 times a year. The only way to grow is to get more customers. You have to close that huge penetration gap, not the tiny loyalty gap.
Sharp gives another example from the UK shampoo market that I found fascinating because the brands are so different in size. He compares Head & Shoulders, which is a global giant, to a small local brand called Vocine.
Yes, this is a great illustration. Head & Shoulders is the market leader, a behemoth. Vocine is a very small player. Now, if you asked a brand manager for Vocine who buys your product, they might say something like, well, we're small, so we must be a niche brand. Our customers must be diehard fans who really love our unique formula.
That's the dream, isn't it? We're small but mighty. Our customers are a special tribe.
It's a comforting story, but the reality is just brutal. The data shows that the average buyer of the market leader, Head & Shoulders, buys it about 2 times a year.
Wait. 2 times a year? That's it? For the absolute market leader, that seems incredibly low.
It does, doesn't it? And we'll get to why that number is so low for almost every brand later on. It's a huge piece of this puzzle. But for now, just accept it. 2 times a year for the leader. Now look at the tiny brand, Vocine. Its buyers purchase it about 1.4 to 1.6 times a year.
So the loyalty difference between being a massive global dominator and a tiny brand sitting on the bottom shelf is just, what, half a bottle of shampoo a year?
In terms of loyalty, yes. The real difference is that Head & Shoulders has millions and millions more people buying it those 2 times a year.
Yeah.
The implication here is just massive for strategy. Marketers spend fortunes trying to deepen the relationship and increase frequency. They run loyalty programs. They send personalized emails.
So they're trying to get that 1.4 up to 1.8.
Exactly. But the ceiling on frequency is very, very low. You can't force people to watch their hair twice as often just because you sent them a coupon. The only way for Vocine to become Head & Shoulders is to go out and get millions of new people to buy it just once or twice. That's the game.
This completely destroys the romantic idea of the niche brand, doesn't it? I feel like I hear this constantly from startups and small businesses. Oh, we're a niche brand. We have a small market share, but our customers love us. We have a cult following.
It's a lovely story. It's a narrative that makes you feel better about having low sales. It's a psychological defense mechanism. But Sharp's data across hundreds of studies shows that true niche brands, brands with low market share, but an unusually high loyalty that defies double jeopardy, are incredibly rare. They are statistical unicorns.
So most niche brands are just lying to themselves.
I wouldn't say lying, but maybe deluding themselves. Most brands that think they are niche are actually just small. They have low share and, as the law predicts, slightly lower loyalty. They aren't special. They're just hard to find. They suffer from low mental availability. People don't think of them. And low physical availability. They aren't on the shelf at the right store.
So if you're a founder sitting there thinking, I don't need to grow my customer base, I'll just focus on super serving my loyal tribe and making them love me more, you are literally fighting against a mathematical law of the market.
You are swimming upstream against a very, very strong current. You are trying to break the laws of physics with a loyalty card and a nice email newsletter. It's not going to work.
This leads us naturally into the next huge myth, which is the obsession with customer retention. I think every business book I've ever read quotes that statistic or some version of it. Reducing customer defection by 5% doubles your profits.
Yes. The famous Reichheld and Sasser claim from the Harvard Business Review. It's practically scripture. It's been ingrained in the corporate psyche for 30 years. The goal is 0 defections. We must plug the hole in the bucket.
But you're saying it's bogus.
It is deeply flawed on multiple levels. First, that double your profits claim comes from a thought experiment, simulation, not from real-world comprehensive data. And a key assumption in that thought experiment is that you can cut your defection rate in half for free.
Which is obviously impossible. Keeping customers from leaving costs money. You have to have customer service teams, you have to offer discounts, you have to fix problems.
Right. It's not a magic wand. But more importantly, and this is the crucial link, Sharp shows that defection rates, or churn, also follow the law of double jeopardy.
How so? How does churn fit into this?
It's the same pattern. Big brands lose more customers in absolute numbers, obviously.
Yeah.
If you have 1 million customers and lose 10%, that's 100,000 people leaving. But as the percentage of their total customer base, big brands actually have slightly lower churn than small brands.
So small brands lose a higher percentage of their customers.
Yes, simply because they are small. It's another penalty for being small. It's part of the double jeopardy law.
So you can't just fix your retention problem and expect to grow into a big brand.
Exactly. Sharp uses the bucket with a hole analogy, which I think is perfect. Every brand is a bucket, and every bucket has a hole in the bottom. Customers are constantly leaking out.
And this is normal. We shouldn't panic about the leaking.
It is completely, totally normal. And the size of the hole is surprisingly consistent for brands of a similar size. Look at the car market data in the book. This is a huge purchase, a high involvement category. People spend tens of thousands of dollars on a car. You'd expect really high loyalty.
You'd think so. Once a Ford guy, always a Ford guy.
That's the myth. But the reality is that even massive successful brands like Ford, Toyota, and Honda lose about 50 to 60% of their customers over a few repurchase cycles.
Wait, 60%? That seems astronomically high. That feels like a crisis.
It feels like a crisis, but it's just reality. And you have to think about why people leave. It's often not because the car was bad or the service was poor. People's lives change. They move to the city and don't need a car anymore. They have triplets and suddenly need a minivan instead of a sports sedan. They lose their job and can't afford a new car.
Or a competitor just got lucky.
Exactly. Or maybe the competitor's dealership was just closer to their new house. These are what Sharp calls uncontrollable factors. You can't fix them with a better ad campaign.
There was that fantastic example of Adelaide Bank versus the Commonwealth Bank in Australia that illustrates this physical, uncontrollable factor perfectly.
Yes, this brings it home so clearly. So Adelaide Bank is a small regional bank. The Commonwealth Bank, or CBA, is a massive national bank with branches everywhere. The data showed that the little Adelaide Bank had double the defection rate of the giant CBA.
So the immediate traditional marketing assumption would be Adelaide Bank must have terrible customer service rate. People are fleeing in droves because they are unhappy.
That's what a typical consultant would say. They'd come in and say, you have a retention crisis. You need to retrain your tellers, improve your app. But the reality was much simpler.
What was it?
Adelaide Bank only has branches in and around the city of Adelaide. If one of their customers gets a new job and moves to Sydney, which happens all the time in a modern economy, they have to switch banks. They physically cannot keep their account because there is no branch for them to go to.
Meanwhile, CBA has branches everywhere.
Everywhere. So if you move, you just find the local CBA branch and carry on. The defection wasn't a brand failure or a service failure. It was a physical availability issue.
You can't run a loyalty program that stops people from moving to a different city.
You can't. The hole in the bucket is partly structural. You can't plug it completely. It's always going to be there.
So if you can't plug the hole in the bucket, what do? How do you keep the water level high or make it grow?
You have to pour more water in the top. A lot more water. All the time. Acquisition is king.
Pour more water in. It sounds so simple, but it really contradicts that farmer versus hunter mentality we're so often taught, where we're told to stop hunting for new clients and just farm our existing ones.
It does. But the data is overwhelming. Sharp cites research by a woman named Erica Reba. She looked at completely different categories: pharmaceuticals, chocolate, banks, and she found a universal pattern. When brands grow, it is almost entirely due to what she calls extraordinary acquisition.
And when they decline, is it because their customers are leaving in droves?
No, it's due to dismal acquisition. The defection rates, the size of the hole in the bucket, remained surprisingly stable, regardless of whether the brand was growing or shrinking.
So the hole stays about the same size no matter what.
Pretty much. The only variable you can really control, the one that separates growing brands from dying brands, is how fast you are pouring new customers in the top.
This is a radical shift in focus. We are told constantly to hug our heavy hitters, delight our current customers, but the math says we need to be relentlessly chasing the new people.
And not just any new people. We need to talk about who those people are. Because this brings us to what I think is the most practical and maybe shocking part of the book. It's what I call the light buyer revolution. This is where the rubber really meets the road for day-to-day marketing.
Okay, let's talk about the light buyer, because this challenges probably the most famous rule in all of business, Pareto's Law, the 80-20 rule.
The sacred 80-20 rule.
That 80% of your sales come from your top 20% of buyers, so focus all your energy on them.
This is another one of those zombie statistics. This sounds smart, it's easy to remember, but it refuses to die despite the evidence. Sharp argues, with tons of data, that the ratio is almost never 80-20 in consumer goods. It's a wild exaggeration.
So what is it in reality then?
It's usually much less extreme. It's closer to what is known as the Goodhart 20.30.50 law.
Okay, break that down for me. 20, 30, 50.
The heavy 20% of your buyers, your top fifth, they give you about 50% of your sales. Not 80%.
Okay, 50. Still a big chunk.
A very big chunk. Then you have the middle 30% of your buyers, the medium users. They give you about 30% of your sales. And then you have the light 50%, the entire bottom half of your customer base, and they give you the remaining 20%.
All right, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Even with the 50-20 rule, the heavy buyers are still really important. They're giving you half your sales. Why shouldn't I just focus all my budget on keeping them happy?
They are important, absolutely. No one is saying to ignore them. But if you follow the mythical 80-20 rule, you might be tempted to completely ignore that bottom 50%. You might look at your spreadsheet and say, oh, they only give us 20% of our revenue. Let's cut them loose and focus on the VIPs.
But losing 20% of your revenue overnight would be catastrophic for most businesses. That's your entire profit margin, usually.
Exactly. You cannot afford to ignore your light buyers. But it gets even crazier and more interesting when you actually define what a heavy buyer is for most brands. And Sharp uses Coca-Cola data here, which is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, I saw this in the book. I consider myself a pretty casual Coke drinker. Maybe I have one once a month, if that.
In the world of Coca-Cola's actual sales data, that makes you a solid regular customer. Because the data shows that even for a mega brand like Coke, a brand that is everywhere, the average buyer only buys it 1 or 2 times a year.
Once or twice a year. For Coca-Cola, that seems completely impossibly low. I can't wrap my head around that.
It seems low because we view the world through our own habits and we see the ads everywhere. We assume everyone is like us or like the people in the commercials. But the data doesn't lie. There is a very, very long tail of millions and millions of people who buy a Coke maybe once for a birthday party or once at the movies and then never again that year. They like Coke just fine. They just don't think about or drink soda very often.
So in that world, who are the heavy buyers? What does it take to be a VIP for Coke?
For Coke, a heavy buyer is someone who buys 3 or more times a year.
3 times a year. That just sets the bar incredibly low. I always pictured a heavy buyer as the guy who's drinking a 6-pack a day.
Well, those people do exist. Let's call them the super heavy buyers.
Yeah.
But they are extremely rare. And here is the big strategic problem with focusing your marketing on them. They are already locked in. They're drinking Coke morning, noon, and night. Your advertising barely affects them because they're already at their maximum possible consumption. You can't get them to drink a 7th can a day. They are tapped out.
Right. You're just preaching to the choir with them. There's no growth there.
But the millions and millions of people who buy just once a year, if your advertising can just nudge them to buy twice a year, you have just doubled your sales from that massive segment. That is where the volume is. It's not in the superfans. It's in the masses of light, infrequent, barely care about you buyers.
There's also a statistical concept that Sharp mentions called regression to the mean, which explains why betting only on your heavy buyers is an actively risky strategy.
Yes, he calls it the law of buyer moderation. It's a fundamental statistical principle. It basically says that over time, extreme behaviors tend to average out. They move back toward the middle.
So my heaviest buyers this year
Right.
will likely buy a bit less next year. It's almost guaranteed. Maybe they go on a diet, maybe their doctor tells them to cut back on sugar, maybe they just get tired of the taste. For a million random reasons, they will regress downward toward the average.
And what about my light buyers, the ones who only bought once? They tend to buy a little more next year, purely by chance. They regress upward toward the mean. So if you put all your marketing budget and all your effort into hucking your current heavy buyers, you're investing in a group that is statistically likely to shrink in value over time. Whereas the light buyers, and even more importantly, the non-buyers, represent all the future growth potential.
Okay, so let's just recap where we are, because we've torn down a lot of walls. We now know we can't really rely on loyalty to grow, we can't stop churn entirely, and our focus needs to be on acquiring millions of people who barely care about us, the light buyers. The big question is how.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the new worldview, the practical application. What do we do instead? This is where we get to mental and physical availability.
This is the replacement for the old religion of differentiation.
Differentiation is such a sacred cow. The idea that we need a unique selling proposition, a USP. We have to explain to the customer, logically, why we are functionally better than the competition. Our toothpaste cleans whiter. Our computer processes faster.
Sharp takes a sledgehammer to this, too. He argues that in most mature markets, brands are largely near lookalikes.
Ouch. That has to hurt the ego of every product designer and engineer out there who has spent their life trying to make a better mousetrap.
It hurts to hear, but think about it objectively. Pepsi and Coke, Nike and Adidas, Ford and Toyota. Functionally, for the average consumer, they do the same job at a similar quality level. They have mostly the same features. They're both reliable.
But hold on. I love the taste of Coke. I would never, ever drink a Pepsi. I can tell the difference.
You might think you can, and you might be one of the few who can. But blind taste tests have famously proven over and over that most people can't. And more importantly, you are in a distinct minority of people who even care that much. Most people are what psychologists call cognitive misers.
Cognitive misers. I like that.
They don't want to spend precious brain power analyzing the subtle flavor notes of their cola or the specific foam composition in their running shoes. They just want a cold, fizzy, black drink. They just want shoes that fit and don't fall apart. They satisfy us.
So if we don't need to be different in a deep, functional, persuasive way, What do we need to be?
We need to be distinctive.
Okay, you have to unpack the difference between differentiation and distinctiveness. It sounds like semantics, like we're just playing with words.
It's absolutely not. It's the most important strategic shift in the whole book. Differentiation is about meaning and comparison. It's saying, I am better than my competitor because of feature X. It requires the consumer to think and process that claim. Distinctiveness is about identity. It's about looking and feeling like you and only you. It's about being recognizable instantly, without thought.
So you're talking about things like the Nike swoosh, the specific Coca-Cola red, the unique shape of the Coke bottle.
Exactly. Colors, logos, sounds, fonts, jingles, taglines, characters. These are what he calls distinctive assets. They don't mean anything functionally. The color red doesn't make the drink taste better. The swoosh doesn't magically make you run faster. But they act as powerful mental anchors. They make the brand easy to notice on a crowded shelf and easy to recognize in a fleeting TV ad.
So the goal isn't to persuade me that you're better. The goal is just to make your brand pop into my head at the moment of truth.
That is the perfect summary. That is mental availability. It's all about salience. When I'm thirsty or hungry or I need to wash my hair, does your brand pop into my mind quickly and easily? Not because I've made a spreadsheet of pros and cons, but because over time you've built these memory structures that trigger automatically. Thirsty Coke. Need shoes for running Nike.
And the second pillar you mentioned is physical availability.
Which is much simpler, but just as important. Are you easy to buy?
If I think of Coke, but the little corner shop I'm in only has Pepsi, guess what? I'm buying Pepsi. I am not going to drive to 3 different stores to find my preferred brand for a $1 purchase. I'm just not.
This goes right back to the Adelaide Bank example. It's the perfect illustration. They lacked physical availability for any customer who moved out of town. So Sharp argues that marketing's main job is not to build love or purpose or relationships. It is to relentlessly maximize these two practical things. Be easy to think of, that's mental availability, and be easy to find and buy, that's physical availability.
You know, when you put it like that, it sounds suspiciously like just good old-fashioned mass marketing.
It is. He calls it sophisticated mass marketing.
But we've been told for 20 years that mass marketing is dead. We're supposed to be in the era of hyper-targeting and personalization. We're supposed to find the left-handed yoga moms who love vanilla and live in this specific zip code.
And Sharp says targeting these narrow segments is often a huge mistake. And the reason is, the data shows that brands within a category all sell to very similar customer profiles. The idea of distinct brand tribes is largely a myth.
Give me an example of this segmentation illusion.
Okay, think about when Coca-Cola launched Vanilla Coke. A traditional marketer, a Cotlerian marketer, might think, okay, our job is to find and target the vanilla tribe, people who just love vanilla flavor above all else.
Right, you'd build a whole persona around this vanilla enthusiast.
But the sales data shows that the typical vanilla Coke buyer is just a regular Coke buyer. They are normal Coke buyers who, once in a while, switch things up and grab a vanilla Coke for a change of pace. They aren't a weird, distinct tribe of vanilla obsessives. So if you only run ads targeting vanilla lovers, you completely miss the vast majority of your potential market, which is just normal people looking for a bit of variety now and then.
So you need to reach all category buyers all the time because you never know when a regular Coke drinker might be in the mood for something different.
Precisely. You have to be mentally and physically available to everyone who might ever buy a fizzy drink.
Okay, before we get to our summary, let's just quickly touch on some of the alternative growth strategies that marketers try when they refuse to accept these laws. We talked about loyalty programs, but what about the idea of finding new uses for your products?
Ah, yes, the classic textbook Arm & Hammer case study. This is taught in every business school as a brilliant example of marketing genius.
I learned this in my first marketing class, Arm & Hammer baking soda. Sales were flat. So they brilliantly grew the business by teaching people to put an open box in the fridge to absorb odors. It was genius.
It is a famous and very compelling story. But Sharp critiques it heavily. He points out that changing mass consumer habits is incredibly difficult and expensive. Most advertising budgets are way too small to teach an entire population to perform a completely new and slightly weird behavior, like putting a baking ingredient in the refrigerator.
So what really happened with Arm & Hammer? Did the fridge strategy actually fail?
It's not that it failed, but that it wasn't the main driver of their massive success. They didn't really succeed by teaching the new use with the powder. They succeeded by putting the baking soda into other products. They launched Arm & Hammer toothpaste, Arm & Hammer laundry detergent, Arm& Hammer cat litter.
Ah, so they didn't change the consumer's habit. They just put their distinctive ingredient into a product category that people were already using every day.
Exactly. They made their product physically available in a category people already bought, like toothpaste. That is infinitely easier and more effective than trying to retrain the human brain to use a box of powder in a completely new way.
What about cross-selling? This is huge in banking and insurance. You have a checking account with us. Would you like a credit card with that? A mortgage?
The famous Wells Fargo example from a few years ago comes to mind here. Their CEO set this incredibly ambitious target called 8 is great. The goal was for every customer to have 8 different products with the bank.
And did it work?
Well, the data from the rest of the industry would suggest no. The evidence shows that cross-selling metrics also follow double jeopardy. All the big banks and insurance companies have remarkably similar and quite low cross-sell rates. It turns out if a customer already has a mortgage with another bank, they don't generally need a second mortgage with you.
There's a physical, logical limit to how many banking products one person actually needs.
Exactly. And the market analysts at the time were very skeptical of Wells Fargo's claims. They looked at the numbers with a jaundiced eye because they seemed to defy the established laws of the category. And as we now know, the immense pressure to hit those impossible targets led to that massive scandal where employees created millions of fake accounts just to hit their quotas.
So they tried to break the law of double jeopardy, and instead, the law broke them.
That is a stark and perfect way to put it. You cannot force consumption beyond what the category naturally allows. You have to accept the physics of the market.
So, if we strip away all the myths and all the romance, there's no easy loyalty fix, there's no cross-selling magic bullet, there's no safety net in being a niche brand. What are we left with?
We are left with the laws of marketing physics. It might feel a little colder, a little less creative and magical, but it's much, much more reliable.
Okay, let's summarize the key takeaways for our listeners. If they want to grow their brand starting tomorrow, based on this evidence, what are the new rules of the road?
All right. Rule 1. Don't panic about your loyalty metrics. If you are a smaller brand, your loyalty will be slightly lower. It's a mathematical fact, not a sign of failure. Focus on penetration instead.
Rule 2.
Rule 2. Don't obsess over zero defections. You can't plug the hole in the bucket entirely. Accept that customer churn is a normal cost of doing business and focus on out-acquiring your churn rate.
Rule 3 has to be about who you target.
Yes. Rule 3. Target the masses. Growth comes from reaching the millions of light buyers who barely know you exist, not from trying to squeeze more out of the few heavy buyers who already love you.
And finally, Rule 4, the new job of marketing.
Rule 4. Be available. That's it. Your job is to make your brand easy to think of, that's mental availability via distinctiveness, and easy to find and buy, that's physical availability. Everything else is secondary.
It really is a complete paradigm shift. We're moving from an old world view of persuasion, USPs, and brand love to a new world view of salience, distinctiveness, and availability.
And we're moving from treating the customer like a rational, deeply involved partner in a relationship to treating them like what they really are for 99% of purchases. An emotional, distracted, busy person who just wants to buy a decent toothpaste and get on with their life.
So here is a final provocative thought for everyone listening. We spend so much time and money in marketing, crafting these complex brand stories. We try to build relationships and foster brand love. We want consumers to be our friends. But maybe the most successful marketer isn't the one who's loved the most. Maybe it's just the one who's noticed the most.
If you are noticed and you are there on the shelf when someone is looking, you get bought. It's unromantic, I know, but it's incredibly effective.
So the next time you are driving past a billboard or walking down that supermarket aisle, I want you to look at the brands around you and ask yourself this question. Is this brand trying to differentiate itself with a complex, persuasive argument? Or is it just trying to be distinctive and available?
Once you see the world that way, you can't unsee it.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive into how brands grow. We'll catch you on the next one.
Keep it scientific.